Glad tidings of great joy. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for, behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. Luke 2:10. When the 17 young missionaries arrived in the Hawaiian Islands in 1820, the first missionary who volunteered, Hiram Bingham, was the first one to preach a sermon in Honolulu, and his text was Luke 2:10, Behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. It was not Christmas, and it was not a Christmas sermon that he brought, but it was an appropriate and right message that can always be used to introduce the gospel. This is the way the angel introduced Jesus to the shepherds, Behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy. Regardless of all the propaganda to the contrary, it is the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ that has been the vanguard of joy and blessing in this world. Let me use again the Hawaiian people as an illustration. These were a depressed people. They were chained to gross superstitions, filled with fears, frightened by every noise they heard. You cannot imagine how a lava flow terrified them in those dark days. They offered human sacrifices. They engaged in internecine warfare. And when the white traders came, especially to Lahaina, they brought venereal disease that decimated the population. The Hawaiians were by no means a happy people. Then the missionaries arrived and brought a message, Behold, I bring you glad tidings of great joy. The gospel was faithfully preached by these young missionaries. Finally a revival swept across the islands like the gentle trade winds. Joy came to the hearts of multitudes. The alohas now spoke of love, and the leis were eloquent tokens of deep and abiding friendships. The ocean, the beaches, surf and sand, the mountains and the sky were no longer vengeful gods for them to fear. Now they recognized them as gifts to be received from the hands of a benevolent Creator who gave them all things richly to enjoy. This is what the gospel has done for multitudes of people in different climes and times, to all races, tribes, and tongues. The preaching of Christ is always the harbinger of joy. For 2,000 years the gospel has brought joy to people who have been sitting in darkness. Joy is absent from the American scene. It is a very strange thing that great joy is absent from Christmas this year in this land of ours. You hear only children giving forth squeals of joy, and gales of laughter come only from young lips today. Our comedy shows cease to be funny, and we're looking for new comedians. The television comedian has had to resort to dirty stories in order to get laughs, and that, we've discovered, is usually canned laughter. We can rewrite now our Christmas poem, "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the land, not a laugh was heard except in a tin can." Even the laughter, we are told, was canned in the past. The smog of sadness has settled down over the church, there is a fear of the future. Today men are not satisfied with things as they once were. The question, of course, arises, how can joy and satisfaction be restored to the human heart? Well, let's think back to what prompted the angel to make this startling announcement. He said that he was bringing to all people good tidings of great joy. Notice that it was not merely of joy, but of great joy. What prompted him to make such an amazing statement? Let us go back now to the Christmas story to see first of all the event, then second, the explanation of the event, and third, the experience that comes from the event. The event. The event is well known to us. It is the familiar record of the Christmas story which you probably have heard several times already this season. However, let us look today at Luke's account. It is matchless, majestic, magnificent, mysterious, but very meaningful. It is a superb, sublime, yet simple story surpassing all others. Luke states this great event with poignancy, with pathos, and with pity. He begins by saying, "And it came to pass in those days, that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus, that all the world should be taxed." Luke 2:1. The word world is the Greek oikoumene mu, meaning habitable earth, and here it really refers to the Roman Empire. If you had asked any Roman in that day what the word meant, he would have told you that when you moved beyond the boundaries of the Roman Empire you were no longer in the world. The Roman Empire was the world. Caesar Augustus sent out a decree that all the world should be taxed. Who was Caesar Augustus? Well, he was a very interesting individual. To begin with, he was not born a Caesar. He was the adopted son of Julius Caesar, and he took the Caesar name. Augustus is a title. When he came to power, he got rid of the republic and became the first emperor. As such, he wanted a title. He was not satisfied with the title of emperor, and he didn't like the title king, nor did he like the title dictator, by the way. He wanted something more grand than that. So they gave him the name Augustus, which carries a religious significance. In other words, this is the beginning of the worship of the Roman emperors as gods. So we see that behind the pomp and circumstance and the ritual of religion of that day stood Caesar Augustus, a man who was cold and callous, cruel and calculating, a man who engaged in brutality. He did not care for human lives, he was interested only in power. He made now a decree that all should be registered for the purpose of taxation. That decree went out through all the Roman Empire. He was raising money to keep the legions of Rome marching because he intended to extend the empire. He was a great ruler, no question about that, but we see him here in his proper perspective. We're told, "And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn." Luke 2:7. That just about tells the story. When that decree went out, there were 2 members of the family of David living in Nazareth who had to go back to their hometown to be registered, and that was Bethlehem. So it was necessary for Joseph to take with him Mary, who was great with child. She should not have been traveling, but that would not have made any difference to this brutal Roman emperor who was concerned, not with babies but with battles, and certainly could not be expected to be tender at a time like this. She must go along. They arrived in Bethlehem in time for Jesus to be born there. To get the full significance of this, we need to go back 700 years to a prophet in Israel who wrote, "But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting." Micah 5:2. According to the prophet, he was going to come out of Bethlehem, but in order for him to be born in Bethlehem, it was necessary to get Mary down there. If we had been looking over the shoulder of Caesar Augustus when he signed that tax bill, we would have heaved a sigh of relief and said to him, "We've been wondering how Mary was going to get down to Bethlehem, but that bill you have just signed will get her down there." God is using you to fulfill a prophecy he made over 700 years ago. Caesar Augustus would have brushed us off. "What are you talking about? I don't even recognize any God but myself." Yet this man was merely a pawn on the chessboard of life, and he was being moved of God to accomplish his purpose. Actually, the Christmas story is one of pathos. Notice that here, "And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn." Luke 2:7. This word "in" interested me. This past week I have had a lot of time to do things that I ordinarily would not do, so I began to trace down this word "in." I had thought it occurred many times in the Bible, but I found it occurs only twice in the New Testament, and both times are in Luke's Gospel. I was very interested to see that though it occurs twice, it is not the same Greek word. The other place where it occurs is in the 10th chapter of Luke. You will recall one of the parables our Lord gave about a man who went down from Jerusalem and fell among thieves. A good Samaritan came along, bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. 10:34. The word "inn" in this instance is pandokan, which is the word for a better inn. Associated with it is the thought of a host, which means there were private rooms. The inn of the parable would correspond to a Holiday Inn or a Hilton today. But back in Luke 2:7 where it says there was no room for them in the inn, he is talking about something altogether different. The Greek word is kataluma. All that a kataluma was in that day was a shelter with 4 walls. It didn't even have a roof. It was actually an enclosure for animals, and people could sleep there also. There was no room for him in that place. In thinking of this, I remember the wagon yards of the Middle West, especially in Texas and Oklahoma, in the old days when that country was being settled. When I was a boy, after the cotton was picked and ginned, everybody made a trip to the little town that was nearby. My father would hitch up a horse to the buggy, and we would drive into Ardmore. In Ardmore there was a wagon yard. I never shall forget it. As a boy I thought it was a great place, a place of real luxury. We would drive in, there were quite a few other buggies and wagons there, and during the day I could come back to where our buggy was and lie down for a nap. There was no roof on the wagon yard, there were no rooms, nothing was furnished but water. It was just a place to stay. I think my dad paid 25 cents to stay in there, and they furnished the hay. If we didn't use hay and feed for the horse, it was 10 cents, very expensive accommodations, let me tell you. I am of the opinion that Bethlehem's inn would correspond to a wagon yard. It was a place for animals primarily, but people could sleep there as well. This reveals something that is just a little different from the conception that we are given at Christmas time. Luke describes an emergency situation. Mary is going to give birth to a child. She can't get to the hospital because there is no hospital. She cannot get into the inn, a place where animals are, because there is no room. They have to look about, and they find an outbuilding. That is what it was, a cave or an outbuilding that housed animals. That is where Jesus was born. Nobody ever has been born in a place lower than that, my beloved. This is what Luke is trying to tell us. It is not a very pretty picture he is painting. Jesus went to the very depths when he came into this world. Then Luke tells us there was a manger. By the way, today they are finding all over that land stone mangers that can be moved about. Mary found such a manger and put her baby in it. This simple expediency has immortalized mangers. To clothe him there was no baby layette, just swaddling clothes, just rags. This is a little different from the nativity scenes that are presented today. I heard a television newscast of a nativity scene being destroyed someplace here in Southern California and how distressed folk were because it was such a beautiful nativity scene. My friend, if it was beautiful, it did not depict the place Jesus was born. He could not have been born in a place more crude and unlovely than where he was born. Now notice that Joseph and Mary did not complain about their lot. They did not protest. They did not demand of God something better. They didn't say, "Look, if you are going to send this little one to us, you've got to provide for him just a little bit better than you are." This story contradicts modern standards of living and human values. There is today, I would say, an insane notion that you can get rid of slums by tearing down old buildings. My friend, if luxury and comforts and gadgets are essential to the development of character, I think we can reasonably assume God would have provided them for his Son, but he did not. The things that are being discounted today are the spiritual and moral values of life. It is obvious now that our young people are being shortchanged by a short-sighted policy that if they are given the right kind of environment and very fine school surroundings, they'll be educated. I think we are learning the hard way today that this is not the way to educate. Television has turned its spotlight on the schoolroom, and instead of developing character, it looks as if we are developing characters. We need to get back to the development of that which is spiritual and moral, or we're doomed, friend. We have today everything to make life enjoyable, yet many of us are not happy at all. For instance, take just one room in our home, the kitchen. We have toasters, mixers, and blenders, we have electric knives and dishwashers, garbage disposals, and miracle washing powders. I saw an advertisement that read, "Take your wife out of the kitchen this Christmas, get her away from the drudgery, and take her out for Christmas dinner." Out of what drudgery, my friend, in this day in which we are living? We have everything today, but we have lost our sense of values and are not happy. The American scene is not a happy one, although we have everything.